Meet Skippy the Hoplosuchus. He's a small, land-loving relative of crocodiles that lived in Jurassic North America, and today he's getting a full update. I first painted this one back in 2019, the first critter profile to have the rectangular box backdrop instead of the far more confusing footprint. It was also one of the first ones to get the mix of detailed and cute that I wanted. For the update, my focus was in practicing lighting, composition, and working with clear shapes for the main background layers. I'll explain more in the video.
Pete's Paleo Pet Shop!
As always, I begin with a photo or sculpture that captures the pose I want. References are super important, especially when learning. To draw over the picture without tracing, I use a big brush and look for the big shapes. I like to use the gloaming brush on Procreate because it reminds me of a crayon or thick charcoal pencil, something big and fat and easy to handle. If you're not used to this, it helps to keep the image small so that you can't see the details. Look for sausages, spheres, and other basic shapes like the curve of the spine. Rough sketch done, it's time for a more refined sketch on a new layer. I grab my pencil brush for this, and I always try to start with the most important part, like the face. I'm sorry for the strobing alligator. I kept bringing it back to look at the details like wrinkles and scales and stuff, and for some reason, I didn't think to set it aside until later. I guess I was in the zone or something. Hoplosuchus has more toes than the gator. It took a few tries to figure it out. Sometimes I jump ahead a step. I've started adding darker, heavier lines in places of shadow and areas that are closer to us. And if I'm being honest, I'm also procrastinating on the scales. The curve of Skippy's scutes and scales was really bugging me for some reason, and I couldn't figure out why. It took me about a week of procrastinating and letting life get in the way before I finally figured it out. The curve of the scutes on the fossil is different than the picture. Of course, kind of obvious now looking back, but I was following the fossil because that's the critter I'm drawing. But since it's at a different angle than my main reference, that makes it look wrong. Where we are as a viewer, and the angle of the thing I'm drawing, will change all sorts of curves and lines that wrap around the shapes in 3 dimensions. Wrinkles, scales, and color patterns all wrap around Skippy's form, because of course he's not supposed to actually be flat. So I just had to do a mental switch of the fossil scale shapes onto the curves of the alligator in the photo. Time for color! I really like Procreate's wash brush for the big blocks of color. As always, start big and then work down to details. For adding a nice scaly texture without actually drawing scales, I really like the Operon brush. When it's big, it's rough and speckly. Then I can shrink it down and it has a roughed up edge that's good for more detailed parts of the pattern. I also used a bit of the Freycinet brush to vary the texture a bit, because it's always important to vary your textures and use different brushes and stuff. I looked at savanna monitor lizards for Skippy's colors. A quick tip on shadows: never use black. Not pure black. I like to use blue a lot because it's common for natural light to have bluish shadows. Take a good look at the shadows next time you're outside. You'll see that they have a blue tint to them. I'll bring other colors in from the background later, just to make sure everything flows nicely and everything looks like it fits together. This is just my main shadow layer that I set to multiply. The photo is there to show me where shadows will fall and how light bounces off the ground, but I definitely don't follow it exactly. The alligator is crossing a road on an overcast day, which really affects the light and makes it so that colors aren't as saturated or bright, and of course the light itself is not very bright and shadows are all pretty dark. But Skippy is going to be in a lovely patch of sunshine. So in this photo, the direction of light is good, but the intensity of the shadows and the brightness of the light will be very different. The forest photo I got for reference is super complicated, so it's great to practice breaking it down into basic shapes, something that I really need more practice doing. So for a background, I need 3 big shapes: the far background, the middle ground, and the foreground. Drawing the outline or silhouette of the middle ground and foreground automatically makes a shape for the far background. Since Skippy is in a patch of sunlight in a dark forest, only the midground is light in color. The dark background and foreground frame Skippy nicely. Composition! I hope. This is just me trying to follow the advice of people much smarter and more experienced than me. When painting the background, I experiment with lots of artistic brushes to find what I like. The biggest issue with digital painting is the sameness of most digital brushes. Mixing up brushes helps break up the pattern that digital brushes tend to have, because if you use the same brush a lot, kind of puts it on repeat and there's not a whole lot of variation in the shape. If you have a jitter setting that rotates the brush a little bit or changes the angle of the brush based on how you hold the stylus, that really helps to mimic the variations in shape you would get with a natural brush. I'm also trying to work on bolder shapes and brush strokes, and letting the brush do a lot of the work for the foliage. For many of the ferns, I use a brush called leatherwood. A combo of terralea and hearts was nice for the swatchy patches of paint, as if I was dabbing an area with a larger brush. These are all default Procreate brushes, by the way. I tried to simplify the shapes in the complex midground by thinking of layers of silhouettes. What does the edge of the shape look like? I'm experimenting with using both color and light to make more contrast between the outlines of shapes, and the combo seems to give the illusion of more levels of shape and complexity than there really is, which I'm pretty happy about. I'm not sure if this is the right way to do it, but it seems to be working, and I really like how it's coming together. Light and ambiance really pull it together and help polish it off. The little dust mote splatters are fun. Next time, I should make sure the most interesting part of the character is the face, though. The white on the tail is drawing too much attention. And Skippy is done! I think I'm getting much closer to what I want with these more recent paintings, and it's really helping to focus on something specific with each one. This painting took 16 hours, scattered over the course of a month. There were a few times I had to set it aside when I encountered a problem I couldn't figure out, but once I discovered what was wrong, I had a lot of fun with the colors and details of this piece. Skippy's ready for a game of hide and seek. I better grab him before he disappears into the ferns. See you next time!